Sarah Martinez had always been different from other girls her age. While her friends spent their teenage years worried about makeup and boyfriends, she was reading military history books and dreaming of serving her country. Her parents, both teachers from a small town in Texas, never quite understood their daughter's fascination with the armed forces. When Sarah turned 18, she made a decision that would change her life forever. Against her parents' wishes, she walked into a tattoo parlor in downtown Austin with a carefully drawn design clutched in her trembling hands. The tattoo artist, a burly man covered in ink, looked at the intricate military insignia she wanted permanently etched on her shoulder blade. "You sure about this, kid?" he asked, examining the detailed design. "This looks like some serious military stuff." "You even know what this means?" Sarah nodded firmly. "Every single detail," she replied. "It's the emblem of the 82nd Airborne Division, specifically the 3rd Battalion, 325th Infantry Regiment. My grandfather served with them in World War II. The artist shrugged and got to work. For 3 hours, Sarah gritted her teeth as the needle carved the elaborate design into her skin. When it was finished, she looked at the mirror and saw her grandfather's legacy staring back at her. The eagle, the parachute, the banner with "All American" emblazoned across it, every line was perfect. Her grandfather, Thomas Martinez, had died when she was only 12, but not before filling her young mind with stories of courage, brotherhood, and sacrifice. He had jumped into Normandy on D-Day, fought through the Battle of the Bulge, and earned a Purple Heart for wounds sustained while saving 3 fellow soldiers from a burning tank. "Mija," he had whispered to her during one of their last conversations before cancer took him. "Service isn't about the medals or the recognition. It's about standing up when others can't, protecting those who need protection, and never leaving a brother or sister behind." Sarah's parents were horrified when they saw the tattoo. Her mother cried for days, worried that her daughter had ruined her chances of getting a respectable job. Her father was more practical but equally concerned. "Sarah, honey, you know that most employers won't hire someone with visible tattoos," he said gently. "And this military obsession of yours? Your grandfather wouldn't want you to throw your life away chasing some romantic notion of war." But Sarah had made up her mind long before getting the tattoo. She had already enlisted in the Army, and she was shipping out to basic training in just 6 weeks. The tattoo wasn't just decoration. It was a promise to herself and to her grandfather's memory. Those 6 weeks passed quickly. Sarah spent them working out religiously, preparing mentally for the challenge ahead, and dealing with her family's mixed emotions about her decision. Her younger brother Miguel was proud of her, but her parents remained worried and unsupportive. The day she left for Fort Benning, Georgia, only Miguel came to see her off at the bus station. As she hugged him goodbye, he pressed a small velvet box into her hands. "Grandpa wanted you to have this," he said quietly. "Mom was saving it for your wedding day, but I think he'd want you to have it now." Inside the box was her grandfather's dog tag, dented and worn from years of service. On the back, someone had engraved a simple message: "For Sarah. Carry the torch. Abuelo Tom." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she realized her grandfather had planned this long before his death. He had believed in her dream when no one else would. Basic training was everything Sarah had expected and more. She excelled in physical fitness, weapons training, and tactical exercises. Her drill sergeant, a tough woman named Sergeant Rodriguez, noticed Sarah's dedication immediately. "Martinez!" she would bark during formation. "What's that ink on your back supposed to mean?" "It's my grandfather's unit." "Drill sergeant," Sarah would respond at attention. 82nd Airborne, 3rd Battalion, 325th Infantry Regiment. "And what makes you think you're worthy of wearing that history on your skin, Martinez?" "Nothing yet, drill sergeant, but I'm working to earn it every day." This exchange happened almost weekly, but Sarah never wavered. She knew that Sergeant Rodriguez was testing her commitment, and she was determined to prove that her tattoo represented more than youthful rebellion. During the final week of basic training, Sarah's platoon faced their most challenging exercise yet. A 48-hour field training event that would test everything they had learned. The scenario involved rescuing simulated hostages while navigating through enemy territory. Sarah was chosen as team leader for her squad, a responsibility she took seriously. As they moved through the dense Georgia forest, she noticed that one of her teammates, Private Johnson, was struggling with the heavy equipment load and trying to hide a leg injury from a training accident earlier that week. Without hesitation, Sarah redistributed the equipment among the squad and adjusted their route to accommodate Johnson's condition. She never left anyone behind, just as her grandfather had taught her. When they reached the objective, Sarah's squad executed a flawless rescue operation. They retrieved the hostages and made it to the extraction point with time to spare. Their success was noted by the evaluating officers, but Sarah was more focused on making sure all her soldiers were safe and accounted for. After graduation from basic training, Sarah received orders to attend airborne school, the same school her grandfather had completed nearly 80 years earlier. She was following directly in his footsteps, and the weight of that legacy both thrilled and intimidated her. At airborne school, Sarah learned that earning her paratrooper wings would be the most physically and mentally demanding experience of her military career so far. The training was designed to break weak candidates and forge the survivors into elite soldiers capable of jumping behind enemy lines. During her first week, Sarah met Master Sergeant Williams, a career paratrooper with over 20 years of service. He was known for his strict standards and his ability to spot soldiers who weren't cut out for airborne operations. "Let me guess, Martinez," he said during their first equipment inspection. "You got that tattoo thinking it would make you look tough?" "No, Master Sergeant," Sarah replied confidently. "I got it to honor my grandfather, Staff Sergeant Thomas Martinez, who earned his wings in this same school in 1943. Master Sergeant Williams raised an eyebrow but said nothing. However, Sarah noticed him checking his roster more carefully that evening. The next morning, he approached her with a serious expression. "Martinez, I did some checking last night. Your grandfather's name is in our Hall of Honor. He was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for actions during Operation Market Garden in 1944. Did you know that?" Sarah's heart stopped. She had never heard about any Distinguished Service Cross. Her grandfather had only mentioned his Purple Heart and had always been modest about his other accomplishments. "No, Master Sergeant. He never told me about that." "Well, it seems your grandfather was more of a hero than even he let on. That tattoo of yours just became a lot more meaningful, Martinez. Don't let him down." That night, Sarah called her mother for the first time since starting airborne school. Through tears, her mother finally revealed the truth about her grandfather's service record. He had indeed been a decorated war hero, but he had suffered from what they now call PTSD and had rarely spoken about his most difficult experiences. "He made us promise never to burden you with the details of what he went through," her mother explained. "He wanted you to find your own path, not live in his shadow. But Sarah, if you're determined to serve, then we support you completely." For the first time since enlisting, Sarah felt the full support of her family. She also understood that her grandfather's humility had been part of his strength, and she carried that lesson with her through the remaining weeks of airborne school. The night before her first parachute jump, Sarah lay in her bunk staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, she would leap from an aircraft at 1,200 feet, just as her grandfather had done over Nazi-occupied Europe. The tattoo on her back seemed to pulse with anticipation. Her fellow trainees were nervous, some unable to sleep. But Sarah felt calm, as if her grandfather's spirit was watching over her. She touched his dog tag, which she wore beneath her uniform, and whispered a promise to make him proud. When morning came, Sarah was ready to take the leap, that would change her life forever. The aircraft engines roared to life as Sarah's stick of paratroopers prepared for their first jump. She stood third in line, her heart pounding with excitement rather than fear. Through the small window, she could see the Georgia landscape spreading out below them like a green carpet. 10 minutes! The jumpmaster shouted over the engine noise. Sarah checked her equipment one final time, running through the procedures her grandfather had described in his stories. The same nervous energy that had filled Allied paratroopers before jumping into France now coursed through her veins. When the green light flashed and the jumpmaster yelled, "Go!" Sarah launched herself into the sky without hesitation. The rush of wind, the sudden jerk of her parachute deploying, and the peaceful silence that followed felt like coming home. She landed perfectly, executed her parachute landing fall flawlessly, and knew in that moment that she had found her calling. After earning her silver wings, Sarah was assigned to the 82nd Airborne Division at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, the same unit her grandfather had served with during World War II. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in her new platoon, especially when they learned about the tattoo during her first day. Her platoon sergeant, Staff Sergeant Thompson, was initially skeptical about Sarah's motivations. He had seen too many young soldiers who joined the Airborne for the wrong reasons, seeking glory or trying to prove something to themselves or others. "Martinez, that ink on your back better represent more than just family pride," he told her during their first counseling session. "In this unit, you'll be tested in ways that will challenge everything you think you know about yourself." Sarah's first real test came during a training exercise in the swamps of North Carolina. Her platoon was tasked with a reconnaissance mission that required them to remain hidden for 72 hours while gathering intelligence on enemy movements. The conditions were miserable: constant rain, thick mud, swarms of insects, and limited food supplies. By the second day, some soldiers were ready to quit. Private Wilson, a cocky soldier from New York, was complaining loudly about everything from the weather to the mission objectives. "This is pointless," Wilson grumbled as they huddled in their camouflaged position. "Why are we sitting in this swamp when we could be back at base getting real training?" Sarah had been quiet most of the mission, focused on their objectives and maintaining watch schedules. But Wilson's complaints were starting to affect unit morale, and she knew someone had to speak up. "My grandfather spent 6 months in foxholes in Belgium during one of the coldest winters on record," she said quietly. "He never complained once, even when they were eating frozen K rations and watching for German snipers. This is just training, Wilson. Be grateful we're not getting shot at." Wilson sneered at her response. "Oh, great, another war story from Grandpa. Just because you have some old tattoo doesn't make you a hero, Martinez." Before Sarah could respond, Staff Sergeant Thompson emerged from his concealed position. He had been monitoring the team's performance and had heard the entire exchange. "Wilson, you just earned yourself extra duty for the next month," Thompson said sharply. "And Martinez, you just demonstrated the kind of leadership we're looking for in this unit. Well done." The mission continued successfully, with Sarah's squad maintaining their position and completing all objectives. When they returned to base, Staff Sergeant Thompson pulled her aside for a private conversation. "I've been watching you, Martinez, and I've been asking around about your grandfather. Turns out he was more than just another World War II veteran. He was part of a special operations team that conducted some of the most dangerous missions of the war." Sarah was stunned. Once again, she was learning new details about her grandfather's service that he had never shared with his family. "There's someone I want you to meet," Thompson continued. "Command Sergeant Major Patterson has been with this division for 30 years. He might have some information about your grandfather that would interest you." The next morning, Sarah reported to Command Sergeant Major Patterson's office. Patterson was a legendary figure in the 82nd Airborne, a soldier who had served in every major conflict since the Gulf War. His office was filled with military memorabilia, unit photographs, and commendations from decades of service. "Have a seat, Martinez," Patterson said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. Staff Sergeant Thompson tells me you're Thomas Martinez's granddaughter. Yes, Command Sergeant Major. Did you know my grandfather? Patterson smiled and opened a thick file folder. I never met him personally, but I know his story very well. Your grandfather is mentioned in several classified after-action reports from World War II. His unit conducted deep reconnaissance missions behind German lines, often operating alone for weeks at a time. Sarah listened in amazement as Patterson described operations she had never heard about. Her grandfather had volunteered for the most dangerous assignments, had saved countless lives, and had been recommended for the Medal of Honor on 2 separate occasions. Why didn't he ever tell us about any of this? Sarah asked. Because men like your grandfather understood that real heroism doesn't need recognition, Patterson replied. They did their job. They brought their brothers home, and they moved on with their lives. That's the mark of a true professional soldier. Patterson closed the file and looked directly at Sarah. The question is, what are you going to do with this legacy? That tattoo on your back represents more than you knew when you got it. Are you prepared to live up to that standard? Yes, Command Sergeant Major. I won't let him down. Good, because I'm recommending you for Ranger School. If you're serious about following in your grandfather's footsteps, you need to prove you can handle the same level of training he went through. Ranger School was a 61-day course designed to push soldiers beyond their physical and mental limits. The failure rate was over 50%, and even fewer women had ever successfully completed the program. Sarah knew this recommendation was both an honor and a tremendous challenge. She spent the next 3 months preparing intensively for Ranger School. Her daily routine included hours of physical training, studying military tactics, and mental preparation for the psychological challenges ahead. Her platoon mates supported her efforts, but she also faced skepticism from soldiers who doubted whether she could handle the demands of Ranger training. The night before shipping out to Ranger School, Sarah received an unexpected visitor at the barracks. Her brother Miguel had driven down from Texas to see her off, bringing with him a package their mother had asked him to deliver. Mom found this in Grandpa's things, Miguel explained as he handed her a small wooden box. She thought you should have it before you leave. Inside the box was her grandfather's combat knife, still in its original leather sheath. The blade was worn from use, and the handle showed the marks of a soldier who had relied on this weapon in life-or-death situations. Wrapped around the knife was a letter written in her grandfather's careful handwriting. The letter was dated just days before his death, addressed to Sarah specifically. In it, he expressed his pride in her decision to serve and his confidence that she would honor their family's military tradition. But the most powerful part of the letter was his final paragraph. Mija, the tattoo you got represents more than just a unit or a war. It represents the promise that some people will always stand between danger and those who cannot protect themselves. You carry that promise now, not just in the ink on your skin, but in your heart. Trust in your training. Rely on your teammates, and never forget that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward despite the fear. I will always be proud of you. Abuelo Tom. Sarah read the letter 3 times before carefully folding it and placing it back in the box. Her grandfather had somehow known she would pursue this path, and he had prepared this final gift to give her strength when she needed it most. The next morning, as the bus carried her toward Fort Benning and Ranger School, Sarah felt the weight of her family's expectations and her own determination. The tattoo on her back was no longer just a tribute to her grandfather. It had become a symbol of her own commitment to excellence and service. She was about to face the most challenging experience of her life, but she wasn't facing it alone. Her grandfather's spirit, his lessons, and his example would guide her through whatever trials lay ahead. The bus rolled through the gates of Fort Benning, and Sarah's journey toward earning her place among the Army's elite warriors was about to begin. She touched her grandfather's dog tag beneath her uniform. and whispered a prayer for strength, courage, and the wisdom to honor his legacy. As she stepped off the bus with the other Ranger candidates, Sarah knew that the next 61 days would test everything she had learned about herself and everything she believed about what it meant to be a soldier. The real test of her tattoo's meaning was about to begin. Ranger School tested Sarah in ways she had never imagined. The first phase, conducted in the mountains of Georgia, pushed her to her physical and mental limits. She averaged 3 hours of sleep per night while carrying a 60-pound rucksack through treacherous terrain. Many of her fellow candidates dropped out during those first few weeks, unable to handle the constant stress and exhaustion. Sarah's leadership skills were tested repeatedly during tactical exercises. She was appointed as platoon leader for a particularly challenging mission that required her team to assault a fortified position while under simulated enemy fire. When 2 of her team members became separated during the night movement, Sarah made the difficult decision to delay the assault until she could account for all her soldiers. "Martinez, you just failed the mission timeline," the Ranger instructor informed her coldly. "In a real combat situation, your hesitation could have cost lives." "Roger, Sergeant," Sarah replied. "But in a real combat situation, I wouldn't leave my soldiers behind. The mission timeline doesn't matter if I don't bring everyone home." The instructor studied her for a long moment before making a note on his clipboard. "Interesting perspective, candidate. We'll see if that philosophy serves you well in the next phase." The Florida phase of Ranger School focused on small unit tactics in swamp environments. Sarah's platoon was tasked with conducting raids against simulated enemy positions while operating in waist-deep water and navigating through dense vegetation. The heat, humidity, and constant moisture created miserable conditions that broke down many candidates. During one particularly difficult exercise, Sarah's patrol was ambushed by instructors playing enemy forces. The scenario required quick thinking and decisive leadership to extract the team from the dangerous situation. Sarah was serving as patrol leader when the attack began. "Contact left! Take cover!" Sarah shouted as simulated gunfire erupted from the tree line. Instead of panicking, Sarah remembered her grandfather's stories about staying calm under pressure. She assessed the situation quickly, identified an escape route, and began coordinating her team's movement to safety. Using hand signals and whispered commands, she guided her patrol through the swamp while maintaining tactical discipline. When they reached the extraction point, the Ranger instructor in charge of the exercise approached Sarah with an expression she couldn't read. "Martinez, that was textbook small unit leadership," he said. "You kept your head when things went bad, and you got everyone out alive. Your grandfather would be proud." Sarah was surprised that the instructor knew about her family history. Later, she learned that her reputation had spread among the Ranger cadre, and many of them had taken special interest in her progress through the course. The final phase of Ranger School took place at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida, focusing on airborne operations and advanced tactics. By this point, Sarah was one of only 12 women remaining in her original class of over 300 candidates. The physical and mental demands had eliminated most participants, leaving only the most determined and capable soldiers. During the graduation ceremony, Sarah stood proudly as her Ranger tab was pinned to her uniform. She had earned her place among the Army's elite, and she knew her grandfather would have been incredibly proud of her achievement. But her greatest test was still to come. After completing Ranger School, Sarah was assigned to the 75th Ranger Regiment, the Army's premier special operations unit. Her first deployment came just 6 months later, when her battalion was tasked with conducting counterterrorism operations in Afghanistan. The mission that would define Sarah's career began on a hot morning in the mountains of eastern Afghanistan. Intelligence reports indicated that a high-value target was planning to meet with other enemy leaders in a remote village. Sarah's platoon was tasked with conducting a raid to capture or eliminate the target and gather intelligence about future attacks. As the team moved through the rocky terrain toward their objective, Sarah felt the weight of her grandfather's legacy pressing on her shoulders. This was her first real combat mission, and she was determined to prove that she belonged among these elite soldiers. The village appeared quiet as Sarah's team approached their target building. Using night vision equipment and moving with practiced stealth, they surrounded the structure and prepared to breach the entrance. Sarah was designated as the second soldier through the door, ready to clear rooms and identify threats. When the assault began, everything happened exactly as they had trained. The team moved through the building systematically, securing each room and searching for their target. But as they reached the final room, they encountered an unexpected situation that would test everything Sarah had learned about leadership and courage. Inside the room, they found not only their target, but also 3 women and 2 young children who appeared to be family members. The enemy leader was using them as human shields, making it impossible to engage him without risking civilian casualties. Sarah's team leader, Captain Rodriguez, was faced with an impossible decision. Military protocol demanded that they capture or eliminate the target, but the presence of civilians complicated everything. As the tension in the room escalated, Sarah noticed something that changed everything. One of the women was signaling with her eyes, indicating that she and the children were not willing participants in this situation. Sarah realized they were hostages, not willing human shields. The enemy leader was holding a grenade with the pin pulled, threatening to kill everyone in the room if the soldiers didn't retreat. In that moment, Sarah remembered her grandfather's words about protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. She also remembered the Distinguished Service Cross he had earned for similar actions during World War II. Without waiting for orders, Sarah began speaking to the enemy leader in the local language she had studied during her preparation for deployment. "You don't want to hurt these innocent people," she said calmly. "Let them go, and we can talk about what you want." The enemy leader was surprised to hear one of the American soldiers speaking his language. This distraction gave Sarah's teammates the opportunity they needed to position themselves for a clean shot. But Sarah wasn't finished. "I know you're scared," she continued, moving slowly toward the hostel. "But these children don't deserve to die because of decisions made by politicians and generals. You can be remembered as someone who protected innocents, not someone who murdered them." Her words seemed to have an effect. The enemy leader's grip on the grenade loosened slightly, and he began to consider Sarah's proposal. But suddenly, he made a move toward one of the children, apparently planning to use the child as a more effective shield. Sarah reacted with the speed and precision of her extensive training. In one fluid motion, she stepped forward, deflected the enemy's arm away from the child, and neutralized the threat before he could detonate the grenade. Her teammates immediately secured the room and began evacuating the civilians to safety. Captain Rodriguez approached Sarah as the operation concluded. "Martinez, that was some of the finest soldiering I've ever witnessed. You saved those civilians while completing the mission. Where did you learn to think that fast under pressure?" "My grandfather taught me that the mission isn't complete until everyone who deserves to go home gets to go home," Sarah replied. "The enemy was a threat that needed to be neutralized, but those families were innocents who needed protection." The successful mission earned Sarah's team a unit commendation, but more importantly, it demonstrated that her grandfather's values could be applied in modern combat situations. Sarah had proven that the tattoo on her back represented more than just historical pride. It represented a living tradition of courage, sacrifice, and moral leadership. When Sarah returned to the United States after her deployment, she was invited to speak at a military leadership conference attended by senior officers from all branches of service. As she prepared her remarks, she thought about the journey that had brought her from a small town in Texas to the podium of this prestigious event. The day of the conference, Sarah wore her dress uniform with her Ranger tab, combat patch, and various medals clearly visible. But she also made sure her tattoo was partially visible beneath her uniform collar, a subtle reminder of the legacy she represented. As she began her presentation about leadership under pressure, Sarah noticed a distinguished older gentleman in the front row who seemed to be paying particularly close attention to her remarks. When she mentioned her grandfather's influence on her military philosophy, the man's expression changed to one of recognition. After her presentation, the gentleman approached the podium. Sarah could see from his uniform that he was a 3-star general, but she wasn't prepared for what he said next. "Soldier, did you say your grandfather was Thomas Martinez of the 82nd Airborne?" "Yes, sir. He served with the 3rd Battalion, 325th Infantry Regiment during World War II. The general smiled and extended his hand. "General Patterson, commanding general of the 68th Airborne Corps. Your grandfather saved my father's life during the Battle of the Bulge. My dad talked about Staff Sergeant Martinez until the day he died. He said your grandfather was the finest soldier he ever served with." Sarah was stunned. The connection between her grandfather's wartime service and her current career seemed almost impossible. But General Patterson continued. "I've been following your career since you graduated from Ranger School, Sarah. Your actions in Afghanistan were exactly the kind of leadership we need in today's army. You've honored your grandfather's memory and established your own legacy of excellence." As General Patterson spoke, Sarah realized that her tattoo had become more than a tribute to family history. It had become a symbol of values that transcended generations: courage, sacrifice, integrity, and an unwavering commitment to protecting others. The general then did something that surprised everyone in attendance. He came to attention and rendered a sharp salute to Sarah, acknowledging not only her own achievements but also honoring the memory of her grandfather and the legacy she carried forward. In that moment, Sarah understood that her grandfather's influence had guided her to this point, but her own actions and decisions had earned her the respect she now commanded. The tattoo that some people had dismissed as meaningless had become the foundation for a career of distinguished service. Years later, as Sarah continued to serve and advance in rank, she would often reflect on that moment when General Patterson saluted her. It represented the culmination of a journey that began with a young woman's decision to honor her grandfather's memory and ended with her own recognition as a leader worthy of that legacy. The tattoo remained on her shoulder blade, now surrounded by scars from combat and training. But its meaning had evolved. It was no longer just about the past. It was about the future and the responsibility she carried to mentor the next generation of soldiers who would face their own tests of courage and character. Sarah Martinez had proven that sometimes the most meaningful things in life are those that others might dismiss as meaningless. Her grandfather's legacy lived on, not just in the ink beneath her skin, but in every soldier she led, every mission she completed, and every life she touched through her service to her country.